And so it's kind of tricky because like no matter what we do, like someone's going to be unhappy. Someone wants something a little bit more entertaining. Someone wants something a little bit more in depth. And so we try to just kind of struggle or balance it all. So do you want your question answered by Dr. K on stream? The honest guide. So step number 1, make a clickbait title. Have your problem be on the extreme end of the spectrum. Nothing short of spectacular will do. You spend $300 a month monthly on OnlyFans? Wrong. You have bankrupted your entire family and taken out loans on your house to pay for your OnlyFans addiction. You had to buy a big swimming pool to store all the bathwater you've been buying on eBay. Have your problem be in either of these, let's upvote, either of these 3 categories that are approved of as Twitch and meme bait. Be a sex addict, aka OnlyFans addiction, have extreme beliefs about women, aka incel, fail to date or be in a healthy relationship to a spectacular and humoristic level. This is me poking a bit of fun, but something I feel is an evolving problem. Over the last year, the content have gone from being relatable levels of problems to only extreme and bizarre problems gets highlighted. I do accept that some people have these extreme problems and they sure deserve help too, but I thought the goal of AoE healing and are the streams hitting the most people when aimed at the end of the bell curve instead of the middle. I can't help to feel that these posts get handpicked for being sensational with the goal of being good entertainment to watch while eating popcorn and not aimed to help as many as possible. At the same time, maybe luring in as many people into the community with popcorn-friendly content is the best way to help as many people as possible. If you got this far, bravo, your attention span is excellent. Would love to hear some discussion in the comments. Right? So, the other thing that we can add is what about making a post that is critical and will create drama? Does that increase your chances of getting viewed on stream? So, like I said, I kind of feel like lecturing today because I'm feeling like a little bit philosophical, but I think this person brings up a lot of problems, which frankly we struggle with on a daily basis. And I love actually talking about this stuff. So I'm going to just kind of like freestyle and share with y'all a little bit about what our dilemma is and how we approach like what we pick. And I think it's cool because there's like stuff going on the internet, which we fall victim to as well. And we like are kind of aware of, but it's really fascinating. So let's just talk about how we pick stuff on the internet. Okay. So the first thing is that like, if we're trying to help the most, so this is I'm genuinely asking y'all, okay? So I'm going to share the conclusions that we've come to at Healthy Gamer, but I'm not saying by any means we're right. I'm saying these are the conclusions that we came to. And if you have a better solution, by all means, please let us know. Like, because this is a serious, what, is this a bug? So like, here's the problem, right? So like, if you think about making content on the internet, we can make like the most useful content in the world. It can be like super, super in-depth, and like it can be aiming to help like a lot of people, like goes into a lot of detail, really kind of digs in deep. And then it's a little bit unclear like whether that will actually do well, okay? So like, I'll give you guys just an example. So let's take a look at, right, so like, let's just take a quick look at our YouTube channel. I'm not suggesting that this isn't perfect information, but this is the struggle that we have, okay? So like, let's just look at our YouTube channel. So like, I think the motivation and goal setting seminar that we did, I think is like a really good example of us trying really hard to make the world a better place. We're trying to sort of, really help people by like understanding like in detail, like how does motivation work? Okay. So let's just see where the other one is. Yeah. So motivation and goals, like part 4 has, so motivation, like, has 20,000 views. Like, let's see the next one. So this one was like uploaded 2 weeks ago, like has 36,000 views. This one was uploaded like a month ago, has like 81,000 views. This one has 100,000 views, right? And then like, how do I poop in public is like maybe around the same quality, right? And so, like it's tricky because like we'll make this kind of content, right? Like, so we'll spend a whole week streaming like in depth about like how to actually help people with motivation. And the truth is that like most people tend to not be too interested in that, right? So like, and that's kind of the sort of tricky thing, is that if we look at like, you know, how do I poop in public? Like, so there's some things that sometimes we kind of get it right, which is like why ADHD is linked to addiction. That was a month ago, 300,000 views. Really interesting video. I think we like educate people, like we educate and try to help and sort of make it sort of interesting as well. You know, there are different other things like, you know, why you get ghosted, and it's why it's your fault you got ghosted. Like that video was uploaded 2 days ago, already has as many views as like basically day one of our motivation video. And so it's kind of interesting because, you know, at Healthy Gamer, like we really try to struggle. Well, we struggle a lot with trying to figure out, you know, is our goal here to be like educational, or is it to like try to help people, or is it to entertain people? You know, one of the things that I struggle with is, let's say I make a video that's 90% entertaining and has like brings 10% value versus a video that has 10% entertainment and 90% value. Like, I think that's a good example of like the motivation series, right? And we kind of did that, and that was like metrics wise, like one of our worst weeks in like the history of Healthy Gamer. So when we kind of go big towards trying to like help people, it turns out that like people, generally speaking, are not too interested in it. So we really struggle with trying to figure out, you know, how to make things like, what's the balance between like entertainment and education? Because this person did sort of allude, they kind of figured it out, which is like, from my perspective, you know, the more entertaining and relatable we make things, the more people we can reach. So if I have a video that, you know, is 80% entertainment and 20% education, and that video reaches 1 million people, do I help more people? Is that better than like a video that's 100% educational that only reaches like 1,000 people? So it's a real problem that we kind of struggle with, and what we try to end up doing is like all of the above, right? So we just go through cycles of like different stuff. So we'll sort of accept that, you know, metrics isn't everything, and our primary goal is like not to grow the channel as big as possible. So if we spend 1 week kind of focusing on motivation and like 95% of the internet doesn't really care about it, like that's okay. Because the truth is that there are a chunk of people in our community that really helps a lot. I think the second thing to kind of think a little bit about is, you know, this person was saying a year ago things were much more relatable. So the second challenge we face at Healthy Gamer is, do we basically do the same content over and over and over again, or do we expand to different kinds of content? So a good example of this is like anxiety, right? So like the first year or two that we were around, like 20 to 30% of our content was like anxiety. We were doing interviews about anxiety. We were teaching about anxiety. We were talking about like anxiety in breathing and anxiety in this and anxiety in that. And then like we sort of did that for a while. And this is kind of the challenge of Twitch, is that like Twitch is not a great place to store content, right? So then like we sort of run into a problem where, you know, people who have been watching it, let's say like we do a piece about anxiety today. The people who have been watching us for a year or two are like, this is boring. I've heard this all before. It's like a rehash of everything that I've already heard. And so they're not happy. And the people who are relatively newer, or maybe missed some of that stuff, are like, oh, like, why don't you talk about things that are like more relatable, like anxiety? And so it's kind of tricky because like no matter what we do, like someone's going to be unhappy. Someone wants something a little bit more entertaining. Someone wants something a little bit more in depth. And so we try to just kind of struggle or balance it all. And I think the interesting thing here is that the third kind of issue here is something that we call online drift. So this is something that's really, really interesting. So it's happening all over the internet, and we're not impervious to it. So part of what we try to do at Healthy Gamer is like give people what they want, right? So we're like trying to figure out, you know, it's not like I wake up and I say like, hey, today I'm going to just talk about this because this is what I think is important. We're really here, what I really view myself as, and what we view ourselves as, is we are a resource for the digital generation relating to mental health things. So our compass actually comes from y'all. So the question is like, what do y'all want? What is important to you? And that's what we'll actually go and do, right? So case in point, I actually really appreciate and love posts like this on our subreddit because it helps us understand like what we could be doing better. And so the challenge with that is that like, so if we make one, so this person kind of mentioned like OnlyFans, right? So if we make one video about OnlyFans and that video does really, really well, then what's going to happen is like people who resonate with the video are then going to post their follow-up questions, right? We're going to see a lot of different views, and we're going to see like, oh, like people will say things like, this is like really helpful to me. Like, thank you so much for posting this. We see 5 more posts pop up about OnlyFans because we made one video about it. People got excited. They wanted to engage in discussion. They engage in discussion, which is fantastic. That's exactly what we're here for, right? We're here to help people with like pornography addiction or OnlyFans stuff or parasocial relationships or whatever. And then what happens is like we think, oh, people are super interested in this because the video got a really positive response. So maybe we can like explore this issue more. And then we'll make another video about like sex related stuff or like parasocial relationships or whatever. And so then what you'll see over time is kind of this like online drift towards like more and more extreme stuff, because we did the basic video. Let's do an advanced video. Let's do an even more advanced video. Let's do a super in-depth video. And so there's this kind of perception that we're like going to the extreme. And this is actually happening. This online drift is happening all over the internet, right? And what's happening is like almost this cosmic internet-wide, what I would call middle child syndrome. So there's like this thing in psychiatry that's sort of true. I mean, it isn't really true, but the idea is there that the middle child kind of gets screwed. You know, the oldest child is sort of like golden child. They're the only kid there. Everyone pays attention to them, you know, like, because they're the only kid, right? And then the second child gets born and they get some attention. And then the third child shows up and they're the youngest, they're the baby. Everyone kind of like fawns on them. So you've got the oldest child kind of trailblazing at the front, and you've got the youngest child getting pampered at the back. And like the middle child, the person in the middle, sort of gets forgotten, right? And they kind of get like left behind. And this is what we're seeing on a cosmic level on the internet, right? So we're seeing like radicalization of all dimensions. So we're seeing like political radicalization. We're seeing like radicalization between different kinds of gamers, right? We're seeing radicalization even between Twitch streamers, like where like the people who are fans of this Twitch streamer, the stans of this Twitch streamer, will go and fight with the stans of the other streamer. And it's like, 30 years ago, like the Outsiders kind of thing, where you've got these two different gangs, and then like, we're going to go have a war on this subreddit on this particular day. And it's like, everyone suit up, like, let's go and battle, right? We also see this in terms of like, romance and dating, where you've got like kind of the incel red pill kind of crowd. And sometimes the incel and red pill crowd fights against each other. And on the flip side of the spectrum, you also have like forever alone and female dating strategy, and which is like kind of like female red pill, I guess. I'm sorry, I don't really know too much about it. I don't mean to offend anyone. And so we're seeing radicalization all over the place. So the other interesting thing about that is that like, part of the reason this is happening is because people who held views that kind of got tempered by, forcing you to interact with like people within your community. Now, if you hold like a view that's like quite rare within like the 100 people that you know in real life, on the internet, you can meet a group of people that will share that view. And then if you guys create an echo chamber and y'all all like talk to each other about this echo chamber kind of stuff, then what happens is you end up like going further and further and further like down the path, right? And then you believe that this is reality because everyone that you talk to has the same shared experience. And so this online drift is a huge problem on the internet. And I think that all the content aggregation platforms are like a big part of it. I don't really blame them for it, because the goal of the content aggregation platform is to give you what you're interested in, right? They're like billions of posts on the internet. And so like, you'll have a website like Reddit or Facebook or YouTube that will sort of try to recommend things to you that you may like. And so as the content algorithm like recommends things to you that you like let's say that you're, like a big fan of Jordan Peterson versus like you're a huge, new age feminist. I don't even know what that means. Just you're a feminist. You're going to get recommended down different trajectories in YouTube. And so there's no there's no crossing of like the divide of beliefs. And so this kind of online drift is an example of like, we suffer from this too, right? And like, this is how we suffer from it. We're aware of it. Like, we're not really sure how to navigate it, because how do we know, okay, is this a case of online drift? Or, and this is what I suspect specifically about OnlyFans, is that these parasocial relationships and like pornographic addiction problems are far more prevalent than we ever really realized, because these problems are evolving. So 5 years ago, the relationship that people had to pornography and the relationship that they have to OnlyFans now has like changed a lot, right? And part of the reason that we try to focus on it, like personally, like I think the reason we focus on it is because I do think it's actually a much bigger problem than people realize. I do suspect that the prevalence is way higher than people realize. On the flip side of that, so this is also why we made like Dr. K's guide, because we realize that there's a certain amount of information about anxiety or depression that people are always going to want. Like, there's a reason why Dr. K's guide is anxiety, depression, and meditation. Like, these are the 3 central pillars that our community has been interested in. So what we decided to do is like go through all of our content, really package it up from start to finish, added a lot of in-depth stuff that most people like didn't care about, to be honest. So if we look at our stream numbers, for example, like, can anyone guess when the most people leave our stream, right? So if we want to like there's one thing that we can do to increase our stream numbers. Can anyone guess what it is? We want to boost our stream numbers. It's meditation, absolutely, right? So cutting meditation from the stream is the best way to improve our stream numbers. It's kind of interesting. So that's where and at the end of the day, like, you know, that's where we have to make like a mission-based decision. Like, do we want to teach meditation on stream or not? And the answer is like, yeah, we do, because like that's part of who we are. And if people want to leave, like that's totally fine. If they want to move on to the next thing, like that's totally fine. And on the flip side, the other thing that we sort of discovered is that like people want more meditation, but we can't really teach advanced meditation on stream because like people are coming in and out. You don't know who's done it. You don't know who hasn't. You don't want to teach an advanced meditation technique to people who are new. And so then that's why we made Dr. K's guide, because like that's sort of a storehouse of content. That's also why we have a YouTube channel, so that people who are interested in like the more relatable stuff, or like the more basic stuff, like it's all there on YouTube. Like, you know, there are tons of videos on anxiety, tons of videos about, you know, depression, tons of videos about trauma, like ADHD, like all that stuff is there. You just have to go look for it. And so that's the struggle that we have. I think the other thing that we can kind of talk about a little bit is to think a little bit about where people in our community are. So what I'd like to do now is share with y'all how we think about helping people. And so the reason I think this is important is because if you look at yourself, like a lot of people want to change. So you may want to change. You may want to say like, okay, I want to do something about my anxiety. I want to do something to get physically in shape. I really do want to pick up a new hobby. I really do care about and want to, change, like I want to improve my life. But when it comes down to it, oftentimes we just don't, right? So there are a lot of people in our community who want to change, but they just find it very, very hard to actually start changing. And this has a big part of our how we design content as well. So there are a lot of people who, let's say, don't realize they need to change. And then over here, there are also people who want change, but don't actually change. And then there are people who are like ready to change. Like, yeah, like I really do, like I've made up my mind. And then there are the people who are actually in the process of changing. Okay? So when we look at our community, and if you're someone out there who is like basically trying, like, I don't know if this makes sense, but a lot of y'all may want to change. Like you really do want it, right? Like you want to change your life. You want to go out and make new friends. You want to go out and ask your crush out on a date. You want to, brush up your online dating profile. You want to switch careers. You want to start writing, your TV show or your script. You want to learn a new instrument. Like there are all these things that you want to do, but you can't actually change. So I'd say the majority of people in our community are actually here. And so this is where let's kind of think a little bit about like what's an example of this. And so then what we try to do is before we get to the example, let's kind of think a little bit about how we craft content. So here's where we create like, meme entertainment content. So the advantage of making this kind of content is that people are like not looking for answers. They're just, looking for entertainment. And so sometimes we'll do this kind of thing. Like I think the Jimmy from Philly, we don't really try to create meme content, but the Jimmy from Philly example video is, I think, a really good example of this, where, in order to, like, it's people came in the door because they heard about like the wildness of the interview, and they walked away like wanting to work on themselves or learning a little bit about compassion. It's almost like tricking people into being better humans. So this is also where, like, we could do a lot of interesting, entertaining content, but like we don't, what we sometimes want to do is like trick people into like, wanting to change, right? So like, I say tricking people because, clearly the reason people are coming in the door is not for some kind of help. So this is also where we can call, like, raising awareness. So the goal of this kind of content is not like really to get anyone to change. It's just helping people understand, oh, maybe like this is my problem. Maybe I never realized that this was going on. And now it's really about raising awareness. And the goal of this sort of content is a little bit different. Then we get this camp. And this is where we what we really want to do is focus on like internal conflict. So an excellent example of this kind of thing is the interview with Mudahar. So if you guys haven't watched that, I'd really check it out. Like if you're someone who's struggling, like there's a part of you that really wants to change, but you can't bring yourself to do it, I think the Mudahar interview is actually like a really, really good example of what you should watch. And the reason is because Mudahar basically, he comes in and he says, I have a problem. And then we talk about it for 2 hours. And then I ask him the question, do you want to fix your problem? And he says, no, I don't think I want to. And so this is a very classic example of why we as a community are stuck. Because I think a lot of y'all may want to change, and that want is genuine. What you don't realize is that there's ambivalence on the inside. And what ambivalence means is that you're conflicted. So resolving that conflict is what's necessary to move you over here across this threshold and where you've actually made up your mind. And so this is where, these are where our kind of solution-based videos are. And so sometimes we'll actually like give people advice, right? Like the dopamine detox video is a good example of like, here's the how. So this is where we teach people the how of changing and progress. This is where, this is why we teach meditation on stream, because some people are actually, even though, 60% of our viewers leave when we start teaching meditation, 40% of y'all stay because y'all are the ones that are like actually interested in meditating. And out of the 40% that stay, half of y'all are actually meditating, and the other half of you are like memeing in chat about meditating, right? So this is where we get to the how, this is where we get to the meditation. And then this is where once people are like ready for a menu, basically the goal here is to provide a menu of options. So like now that you're ready to change, what's going to work for you? And this is where actually like we get to our, for lack of a better term, our products, right? So this is why we have these kinds of things. This is where coaching lives. This is where Dr. K's guide lives. This is where meditation also lives. Right? So it's not all these things are not necessarily paid. So this is also where you could even say things like dopamine detox video. There's a lot of stuff on YouTube. So some of our YouTube videos are like very like solution focused, but these are people who have like gone over that awareness hump. And so for those of you who are, maybe some of y'all have figured this out, but this model that we use to understand you actually correlates with something called the stages of change model. And so this is what we would call pre-contemplative. This is contemplative. This is planning. And this is action. So this is an evidence-based model of behavioral change that, I use as an addiction psychiatrist. And basically the idea here is that there are, let's see, is this catching up? Where was I? Yeah, so this is the stages of change model that we use. And so like, here's an example of, as an addiction psychiatrist, what I look for. So this is like, let's take the example of like marijuana addiction. Okay, so like what would someone say who's in this mental stage of change? So over here, they would say, I don't have a problem. Over here, they would say there are upsides and downsides. So a good example of this is like, I want to quit for these reasons, but I don't want to quit for these reasons. Okay, and then over here, it's I'm ready to quit, but I don't know how. So here's like the menu phase, right? So I'll say, okay, like, do you want to go cold turkey? Do you want to just like smoke on weekends? Do you want to go to Alcoholics Anonymous or like, Marijuana Addicts Anonymous? Like, what do you want to do? Do you want like medication? Like you need something for your anxiety? Like that's where and then this is where you actually like act. Okay, like let's go. And so even within our community, like the reason that we have, let's say, more meme heavy content is because some people are over here. And what these people are going to respond to is like memes and awareness. Get them thinking about it, right? So as a psychiatrist, when I'm working with someone who's pre-contemplative, I'll just ask them questions. I don't want to because I don't want to just, pounce on them and say, hey, you need to quit smoking pot. Because that's what happens a lot of times, right? In addictions, you'll have family members that come to you and say, hey, you have a problem. You need to admit that you have a problem. This needs to stop. And it doesn't work. Like people sometimes get forced into rehab and then like I kick them out in a week because they don't want to come. They don't want to be there. They don't want to do the work. So they come for a week and then they end up getting kicked out. The reason they came in the first place is because their wife is threatening divorce. If they show up and they're not doing any of the work, so it's like, hey, you just go, dude. Like, if you're not going to do the work, just go. So you can't jump to action. And this is the problem within our community is that a lot of people want to jump straight to action. They're like, what do I do about this? How do I fix this? What's the solution? Whereas where you really are is over here, which is like, yeah, I kind of want to change, but I don't really want to change. So even if you think about things like playing video games, like, yeah, I should really stop playing video games. I really need to get a job. It's really, really important. But then I'm like, okay, so uninstall all your games and go get a job. They're like, but it's boring. I can't get the job that I want to. Oh, in this capitalistic society, blah, 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 blah. Right? And then like you come up with all this resistance, all the reasons that you don't do things. And this is really where most of our community is, that a lot of y'all do want to change, but you have some kind of internal resistance to actually changing. And so once y'all are ready to change, then it's about figuring out a menu, right? Like, is coaching right for you? Is Dr. K's guide right for you? Is just YouTube and Twitch right for you? Like, is going to therapy right for you? Right? Like, do you want to do it? Do you want to DIY? Do you want help? Do you want our help? Do you need someone else's help? Do you have like a clinical problem? Like, what's going on here? And then as we sort of work through those things, then we end up acting. Right? Oh, I tried Dr. K's guide. It actually didn't help me that much. Coaching wasn't for me. Or what we hear more often is, I've tried going to a therapist and it didn't help. Let me try coaching. So we'll hear that. And that's where you kind of get to the action phase. And so part of the reason that we approach content the way that we do is because if we think about where you are on this journey, like ask yourself, do you think you have a problem? Do you have a problem, but you're truly conflicted about it? And this is where I think most people don't realize that they're actually internally conflicted. That's why they don't act in the first place. And then once you've resolved that internal conflict, then you can start to plan, right? But this is where we see this a lot in our community. We actually see this a lot, especially in group coaching, where people will come into group coaching and they'll be like, I was hoping people would give me tips or a curriculum to like fix my life. I came here looking for answers. And this is where like we can say like, okay, here are the answers. But if this is where you are in your stages of change, or if this is where you are in your stages of change, giving you answers isn't going to help. Which is why, what our coaches ask these people who come in looking for answers is, when someone gives you answers, when someone gives you advice, what happens? Do you implement it? Do you listen? Do you actually change? And then the people are like, no, not really. And that's why they actually have to go here and do the actual work of coaching. So this is why group coaching is important, because everyone is looking for answers. And if you look at blogs, right, blogs will tell you like exactly what to do. Like you can read about exactly what to do. I can tell you, wake up every day at 6 a.m., work out for an hour, meditate, have a smoothie for breakfast, work on your resume, apply to a couple of jobs, and then like do your work from 12 to 8, go for a walk in the evening, play games for an hour, and lights out by 10. I could tell you to do that, but ain't no one going to actually do it. And so this is where, that's our approach, is to kind of like help people with their motivation, not to give solutions, because the other, like, we don't know what solution, like some random coach on the internet isn't going to know what solution works for you. Like, we'll get there. We have to get to know you, but it's really working on motivation. So we try to design content to address all of these different things, right? Sometimes we have interviews that end up over here. Sometimes we have interviews where the person has conflict. Sometimes we even have interviews. So we had an interview with a guy with complex PTSD. I think that's what he said his diagnosis was. And he was like, can I ever be fully healed? That's a really interesting interview as well. And I kind of laid out for him, okay, here's the process of like how you overcome complex PTSD from start to finish. And so some people are ready for that. Not everyone is ready for that. Some people don't even realize that they have complex PTSD or that they've been traumatized. So that's kind of how we approach things. And if y'all are trying to figure out, okay, like what's right for me, why can't I change despite wanting to change? This is sort of the thing to really understand. Like, this is the frame of mind of like how change happens. So this is the frame of mind that leads to the evidence-based technique of motivational interviewing. So how can you talk to someone to actually, in a scientifically validated way, increase their motivation to act? And this is the model that we use. So understanding this model also explains why people who look for solutions don't get better. Because the solution that they look for, it doesn't fit the cognitive space that they're in. Questions? So part of the reason that, so if you're someone who wants to change, but you find yourself being unable to change, and you end up looking for solutions, right? You look for this, let me do a dopamine detox. Let me like start eating keto. Let me just do this thing, and then all my life will be fixed. And if you're one of these people that like can come up with all the things that you should do, but you can't figure out why you can't do them, you just can't bring yourself to do them, you need to understand the stages of change model, because this model of like internal motivation explains why people can have the right answer and not implement it. It explains how to go through the process of being in denial to being internally conflicted to actually being prepared to act and then actually implementing change. But until you resolve that internal conflict, until you are aware of what's going on inside you, I can give you the perfect solution and you'll never implement it. And so what we try to do here at Healthy Gamer is actually like structure our interviews, structure our questions, structure our lectures to try to hit each of these dimensions so that we can help everyone along the spectrum. The real challenge is that, like, I would say 75% of people out there are in the contemplative stage, which means their main problem is internal conflict. There's a part of me that does, and there's a part of me that doesn't. Can we do this to ourselves? You can absolutely do it to yourself. In fact, most human beings do it to themselves. Right? Most human beings find their internal motivation over a long and painful process. The advantage of, what we try to do is accelerate that process. So, I guess there may be theoretically cases of people who wouldn't be able to do it on their own. But what we really try to do, like our emphasis at Healthy Gamer is like, y'all can't wait. Like, there's a real cost if you spend 3 years figuring this stuff out. So we try to accelerate the process. Right? We can guide you. Like, that's the whole point of like, anyone can start at the age of 15 and like discover a lot of mathematics. Like, you can discover all that stuff on your own. But depending on how much you get taught, like you can, you learn the basic stuff that is already known so much faster. And then you can like discover like mathematics that has never been discovered before. So that's what we really try to do. Is there a world okay, so Dr. K, in regards specifically on cannabis, is there a world in that daily controlled use of cannabis can be helping with no negative side effect? Am I addicted, or is the substance helping me for real? So that's a good question. So let's take a quick look at this question. As it relates to cannabis use, is there a world in which I can use cannabis every day and have no negative side effect? Am I addicted, or is this substance helping me? And I think the biggest thing you need to do is stop using the word or. It's and, okay? So is there a world in which there's daily controlled use that has no negative side effect? I would say no. So you can use, is it helping you? Sure. But is it going to have a negative side effect? Almost undoubtedly. So that's where, like, when we think about the, medical use of cannabis, it's not about no negative side effect. It's about the benefits outweighing the harm. So I'll give you guys just like an actual example of like clinical cases of when I recommend cannabis use. So the number one reason I will recommend cannabis use is to reduce the dependence on prescription opioids. So opioid addiction is far more damaging, in my opinion, than like some amount of cannabis use. So there are studies that show that if you are addicted to opioids, first of all, it's very impairing, causes a ton of suffering. People are in a lot of pain. They use a lot of opioids. They're mentally impaired. They can't work. They can't drive. They're super constipated. People are stealing their pain meds. It causes all kinds of problems. Narcotic addiction is super bad. There's an opioid epidemic. People are like overdosing all the time. So in a harm reduction strategy, adding cannabis can sometimes clinically be a good idea because it reduces their dependence on opioids. Now, would I recommend that people stay on cannabis and opioids for the rest of their life? No, I think that that's a step along your path, right? And ideally, you should be free from all substances. And so can it help you? Sure. Like, can cannabis have positive effects on anxiety? Like, absolutely. And can you become chemically dependent on it? Absolutely. There are also prescription medications, like clonazepam is a good example, that can be very effective for anxiety and have people having like a chemical dependence on it, which is unhealthy. So I think it's all about risk versus benefit, and that's why you should have a conversation with your actual doctor to figure out, okay, where am I on the spectrum? But my gut instinct is that 70 to 80% of people who use cannabis use it in an unhealthy manner, and it probably is like more about like addiction as opposed to being therapeutic. And that's especially like basically all the people that I know that use cannabis in a relatively healthy way are the ones that use it rarely, basically, right? Like if it's like something you use like every 2 or 3 months, like then it's almost certainly like not addictive because you just can't be addicted at that point. Right? So, and then this is where like, if you're listening to this video and the idea of using marijuana once every 2 to 3 months creates a lot of resistance in you, then you may have a problem, right?